Hey guys, I think I need to start this video out straight away and I need to hand in my One Piece fan card because I do not know how it has been this long and I have not known this information. Today's video, we're going to be talking about Franky. And before we get started on anything, we're going to have to include spoiler warnings. It's nothing that you will ever see in the anime or manga, but it is a piece of information that was revealed about Franky in both a Viva card and an SBS question by Oda about Franky's parentage. I'm sure you already know where I'm going with it. I appear to be the only one out of the loop for whatever reason. But yeah, so if you don't want to know who Franky's daddy is, turn off now, but I'm just going to assume that everyone already knows. Queen is Franky's father. How has it been this long and this has not been flagged to me? I do my best to keep up to date with all of the SBS questions that Oda answers, especially the important ones for the story, because he likes to give out certain information that hasn't been touched on, at least at the time, about some of the canon events of the story. And it was never said in a specific detail. Just to rehash and go over it a little bit, just in case you're like me and you've been completely out of the bubble here. In Queen's Viva card, it was revealed that 36 years ago that he had a child, and that 26 years ago he abandoned a child. No mention of the child's name, and then to further go on from that Viva card, in an SBS question, Oda was asked directly about it. He answered it in a very Oda way, but everyone could draw the lines and come to the conclusion that Franky was Queen's biological son, who Queen abandoned 20 years ago. Now, this is even meant, if you go onto the wiki of One Piece, it will mention Franky being Queen's son. Not like, it's theorized that he's his son. It will mention that. Oda has all but come out and just confirmed it. And that is something that I do not know how I've gotten this far without knowing. The reason this video is coming up because I was watching a teching video earlier today. And it wasn't even a Franky-centric video, but Franky's parentage came up. And he was going on about him being Queen's son. And I'm like, I was chuckling to myself. I'm like, waiting for the punchline, as, teching's known to give. If you're a fan of One Piece YouTubers and you've been watching for any period of time, I'm sure you've come across at least one of his videos. And I'm like, where is it? Like, I was expecting to hear a haha, but it wasn't. I'm like, I have to fact check this. This is totally new information to me. And I found out about it. I'm like, well, now I have to make a goddamn video about it. Not for anyone else's sake other than my own, because I need to get these thoughts out about this. It's not vital to the canon of the story, but a big piece of information that I was unaware of. And it brought up a few questions of, I was thinking to myself, could I do anything with this as a video idea? Like, what about a what-if scenario if Franky had met with Queen at Wano when they were both there in Onigashima? And the more I thought about it, I didn't want to do a theory video about it, but the more I looked into it, the more I actually got a new respect for Franky's character, and specifically some similarities that he has with Luffy. Now, before we get into that, where my kind of mind led me, where I trailed off to, it's important to know that Franky is not one of my favorite Straw Hats, if I'm being honest. I reckon he's potentially my second least favorite Straw Hat, at least up until today. And it's a little bit of a sad for his character, because I really loved him pre-time skip. Then post-time skip happened, and I really just was not a fan on Franky's design. It's really out there, and I'm learning to have a new appreciation for it, but it just wasn't doing anything for me, really. And he doesn't have as many cool moments post-time skip compared to pre-time skip. So, and not to mention, the other crew members all have, are all great in so many different ways, where he was kind of falling lackluster behind everyone type of thing. Whenever Franky would come on, when there was a Franky fight post-time skip, I'm like, oh, all right, let's get this over with. I'm not super invested in your character, but, let's see where it goes. But when I was thinking about this what if scenario, the first immediate, and people might have differing opinions here, it's all very subjective, but I thought to myself, what would Franky have done if he had seen Queen? Now, we first need to establish why no recognition happened on Onigashima or Onigashima in Wano. Now, they didn't have any, they were very, very rarely in the same room together. Franky used to go by his old name, Cutty Flam. A little bit more trivia for you. I always wondered, Cutty Flam. That is quite possibly the most unusual name in all of One Piece. And, we've got names like Joy Boy in the contention there. But Cutty Flam has references to types of ships, so that could have been why Oda decided to call him Cutty Flam. But because he's not going by his birth name, Queen wouldn't have recognized him from, word of mouth. And it has been 20 years. Franky has now become a cyborg, and a very eccentric-looking cyborg. And Queen, we don't know really what he was looking like at the time where he abandoned Franky. I know a lot of people can speculate that, he might have been a lot skinnier, he might have looked entirely different. But they didn't recognize each other. I saw one comment about, not a comment, I think it was on Reddit, about, I haven't fact-checked this yet, but every time that Franky and Queen were in the same room, Franky was in his Franky Shogun, and Queen was in his Brachiosaurus dinosaur form. And I reckon if that is true, that is, I don't know if Oda deliberately did that, but that is very, very good narratively implying why they might not have recognized each other. But let's say they did. Let's say, Franky sees him and is like, is that you, old man? Is that you, Pops? And how would that go? From Queen's perspective, it's less interesting. I don't think he'd be so bloodlusted wanting to kill Franky or anything like that. But I really don't think Queen would care and would be more than happy to kill Franky if it came to that. But Franky, I think, would also have a similar reaction, but I think it means so much more to his character. And I reckon it means a lot more to his character because of the connection that it brings up with Luffy. I reckon Franky would really, really not care at all that he's been reunited with his dad. And I get a lot of Luffy vibes there, of Luffy really not caring at all that Dragon's his father, or, he doesn't have any really strong desire to meet Dragon. And I think Franky would be very, very similar here. When he's a kid, when we see Tom and Iceberg go and meet up with him, he mentions offhandedly, oh, my stupid parents abandoned me, they dropped me off here and left me. We never see him in his entire character express a bunch of scorn or resentment to his parents. I think he looks at it very similar to Luffy of, well, this is my lot right now. And he fills that gap that his parents might have left with other loved ones that he was able to develop and create. People like Tom, who plays a very strong father figure in his life. People like Iceberg. And it reminded me of Luffy forming those connections with Makino, with what's her name? Dadan. With Shanks, he kind of plays a big brother, uncle-y figure, but you could also say a father role model too. Luffy goes and he forms his own connections with his brothers, with Ace and Sabo. He doesn't let the life that the cards that life dealt to him, he doesn't let that define who he is. He goes and creates his own family. Of course, he still has Garp, but he goes and creates his own family, very similarly to how Franky did. And Franky gets fulfilled with the family that he did create, that he doesn't really need to have any sort of lingering resentment to Queen. He is just another, they're all pirates, but he's just another villain here who is terrorizing people that Franky, like the rest of the crew, have come to really appreciate, respect, and like. So, like Luffy, I don't think he would let his parentage get in the way whatsoever. And it just made me, Luffy and Franky having that in common, I think made me have a deeper respect for their relationship. Because they're similar in more ways. And I would say in the way that they're both entirely unashamedly themselves. I would probably say that those are the two biggest people in the crew who never try and kind of hide behind any sort of guise or gimmick. They are who they are. And I really can respect that about how they can share those similarities. And that Franky came to Luffy in such a crucial time where Luffy was in desperate need of a shipwright, and specifically a shipwright like Franky. If you all remember, when they were going to Enies Lobby, to Water 7, and Luffy was drawing the picture of what his shipwright would look like, it was a picture that resembled Franky quite a bit. It was shocking Luffy's art style, but it was the blue hair, he had everything going for me. It looked like Franky. And I reckon, other than with the exception of Nami and Chopper, that Franky was the most desperate pull that Luffy was able to find, because he needed Nami to navigate. Now, you could argue that because they were in paradise, that a navigator wasn't as essential as what they might be in the New World. But with just him and Zoro, they're not going to get anywhere. If maybe he encountered Sanji third, Sanji would maybe have enough kind of, not so much sailing knowledge, but enough kind of foresight and intuition and ability to read maps and stuff that through sheer force of will they could maybe get to the different islands in Paradise. But Nami was an essential pull. Chopper was desperate and probably the one he needed the most, especially given the state that Nami was in when they got to Drum Island. You could argue that Sanji was desperately needed as well because you need a chef, but we do know that at that time Nami was doing all the cooking, and while a proper chef would 100% be needed, at that current period of time, if they didn't encounter Sanji at the Baratie, they could have lasted a few more islands to get a proper chef, especially because their crew is so small. But Franky, just like Chopper, was desperately needed, and he came to Luffy at such a pivotal time in his journey, especially when Luffy had to step up and be a captain, especially at that time in the story, there weren't too many cases like this. There was one with Crocodile, especially, where he kind of stood up to Vivi and was like, this isn't what we're doing anymore. This does not make sense. We're going to go confront Crocodile directly. And this one where he steps up and he's like, no, we need to get a new ship. This is a hard decision, but this is something that we need to do. So the way that we could see Luffy maturing in the arc to then be able to bring Franky along, who was once his enemy, into the fold, I reckon that's really, really... It makes their bond a little bit stronger. And it's a connection that I never really had thought of before, because Franky's a little bit goofy, he likes to goof off with Luffy, but they don't have super close moments in the anime, where they're teaming up together or where they have like this deep conversation. That's kind of reserved for Nami, Robin, Zoro, Sanji, even Usopp. But I feel like the more you look at it and the subtle undertones of their character arcs, where they met, and their personalities, that Franky and Luffy have surprisingly a lot in common. And I think Luffy would value Franky's... Luffy values all of his Nakama, but I think Franky especially is someone that he would really, really relate to and value in the crew for what he is able to provide. We know that before Jinbei, Franky was considered the dad of the crew. So I think Franky provides really, really, undeniable impacts to the crew outside of his carpentry knowledge. But that's mainly what I wanted to talk about, Luffy's kind of connection with Franky, and kind of my appreciation for Franky's character going up, just from this knowledge of Queen being his father. Because Queen and Franky, they have a lot in common. They're both cyborgs, they're both scientists in a way, they're both engineers, they both make weapons, Queen's is, mass killing weapons of, poisonous gas and other diseases. And Franky has his battleships, the battle Frankies that he was able to create. They both wear the black shades. They both like dancing. It was right in front of our face, well, right in front of my face. I'm sure a bunch of you already kind of speculated that that could be the connection there. But to see him be so similar to Queen but so different in all the ways that truly matter as well, I reckon that's a fabulous contrast that Oda was able to do there with his characters. But let me know, what do you guys think? Do you think I'm wrong? Do you think if they met each other, it would be, we would see a softer side of Queen? Because Queen is, out of all three of the calamities, I would say he's probably the most chaotic evil out of them all. Because King is, evil. He's a bad dude, but his is all in service of Kaido, the loyalty to Kaido. Jack is more, he's like the younger brother of the group. You can sort of see that his reason for fighting is more to just impress the people that he deems close to him, King, Queen, and Kaido. Very evil though with what he was doing with to Zoe and stuff like that. But I think his kind of, I don't want to call it stupidity, but he kind of has a childlike demeanor a little bit, and I think that kind of tones it down a little bit, where Queen is fully cognizant of what he does. He just loves experimenting on people. He's a sick and twisted individual that is dressed up with flamboyant dancing and surprisingly a large amount of charisma. But he's kind of just like a more charismatic version of Caesar. But I reckon that he is probably the most evil one out of all of them. In a way, you could say he's probably more evil than Kaido as well. Because Kaido has, at least, his actions have purpose behind them. While Queen's are more like, I want to try this new weapon of mass destruction. Who can I use it on? Can I use it on everyone here in Onigashima and just kill all of them? And he does it all just for his pleasure of it. There's not greater purpose. Not the greater purpose absolve someone of their bad sins, but at least we can look at that as look at that objectively and be like, there's a reason for his actions. So the fact that Franky, who, doesn't judge anyone given what he acts like, is so like empathetic to everyone. We see him weeping and crying over all these awful things that happen to people. He's the biggest crybaby out of all of the goddamn Straw Hats. He makes Kobe look like a cold-hearted, heartless, ruthless person with how much Franky cries, and his father is this mass-murdering psychopath. So I love the contrast there. A little bit of nature versus nurture, but even when we see Franky as a kid, I don't think he would end up the way Queen did. But we see Tom's influence, we see Iceberg's influence on Franky to kind of turn him into the person that he would be. The sheer amount of empathy that Franky had from knowing that the battle Frankies had hurt and killed people. Iceberg didn't have to sit him down and give him a massive lecture. As soon as Iceberg brought it to his attention, Franky's like, oh my god, he's right. What I've created here have hurt people. The way he felt so guilty over what happened to Tom that he virtually went and offed himself. He had no way of knowing that he was going to survive that collision with the steam train. But he went and did it anyways, and then had the tactical brilliance to reconstruct himself with scrap metal. That alone might be the greatest non-battle feat in One Piece. Like, how do you just do that? A few bits of metal fly off at this stage, a makeshift train, and then you're able to reconstruct your body and do something like that. That is, with no kind of medical expertise, fight me in the comments. That might be the greatest feat in all of One Piece that is outside battle, tendencies. But I've yapped on enough about this. How I've made, this should have been a 30-second video. Hey guys, did you know Queen was Franky's dad? See you later for the next one. But I wanted to talk about Franky. I do need to do a whole proper Franky video. I've never spoken about Franky on this channel outside of when he pops up in other characters' videos for like a minute. So it's been nice to be able to shine some light on him and just earn some new respect for Franky. All the Franky lovers, let me know down in the comments, where would you kind of rank him? Is he one of your top Straw Hats? Is he the middle of the bunch? Is he one of your more least favorites? Did you have a difference of opinion from pre-time skip to post-time skip? today's all about Franky, so leave all the comments down in below what you guys think of him. But everyone, have a lovely night, and I'll see you for the next one.